Good morning.
Good morning and welcome to our webinar on Decisive Intuition. I just had a little interrupt there from my Google on my phone. Hang on, I'll just kill that. Okay. Thanks very much everyone for joining us, and my name's Gavin McGahey and I'm the Managing Director of Planning Plus Software, and today we have a special guest on our webinar, and that guest is Mr. Rick Synder. Now Rick is the author of Decisive Intuition. It's a book that he wrote a couple of years back now, and Rick's a known business coach based in the United States, and I've been fortunate enough to work with Rick a few years back. We've kept the relationship strong and we're always looking out for each other and what we're doing in our marketplaces, and I thought it would be an ideal time in this current situation to get Rick on board and just have him share with us some of his thoughts around this. One, his book itself, and how we can utilize intuitive decision making in our current environment and what we can take into the future from the intuitive decision making. Now, everyone's got a Q&A at the bottom of their screen, or a raise hands or a chat options that you can use as well. So what I'd like you to do, if everyone in the Q&A could just simply put in where you're from and what the weather is like where you're at, just so we'll know that you're on board. That would be great to hear from people, because we've got an array of people that have joined us today, which is fantastic. And we've got Vinny's coming into us, and he's from Adelaide and he's got sunny weather over there. So welcome, Vinny. Great to have you. And Vinny's been really good. He's been jumping onto all of our webinars, whether they're training webinars or special guest webinars, which is great. So thank you, Vinny, for that. We appreciate you coming on board. And we've got Warren from Christchurch. Beautiful day there. Thanks, Warren, for joining us, and welcome to today's webinar. And we've got a few more people coming in as well. We've got a chat message there coming through. So we've got Meredith's joined us from South Australia. So welcome, Meredith. Thanks very much for joining in. And we've got a few others on board as well. Larry's raised his hands. Thanks very much, Larry. And yeah, so just welcome to everyone for joining us, and let's get cracking with this, because it's an interesting subject matter, especially around gut-based decision making. Now, I know, Rick, over time, I've made some gut-based decisions that have helped me out, and I've ignored some gut-based feelings and decisions that I sort of reflect back on and go, I should have listened a bit closer there. But just to everyone, before I hand over to Rick, just a little bit about Rick's book. This is his book here, and I've got 5 copies of this to give away after today's webinar. And just Dr. John Demartini, who is an international best-selling author, said of Rick's book, if you're looking for a fresh approach that will help your company set a powerful direction and make a wiser decision that your people can get behind and create a more alive and engaging workplace to work, look no further. Decisive Intuition is the blueprint for the empowered and innovative culture you've been waiting for. So that's comes at a pretty good recommendation there, Rick.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Gavin. Yeah.
Let's hand over to Rick, and everyone, please ask questions as we go along. Rick and I are all too happy to have some good interaction during the webinar. So feel free to pop a question into the Q&A, and then we'll just answer them as we go. And enjoy Rick's presentation.
Thank you. And thank you. Great to be with you again, Gavin. Always a pleasure. And just as Gavin mentioned, we've worked closely together a few different times. I've helped coach Planning Plus Software, but also Gavin and I have co-led some seminars throughout Australia, in the Cooley area and other parts of the Gold Coast area. And so we're pretty familiar with each other and working together. So it's great to be with you again, Gavin.
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah. And so one of your questions you were asking me, Gavin, before we even started this was, why did you write the book? What led to that? And then how do you context the book now? And how does it relate to our times with COVID and everything that's going on? So I just thought I would summarize that just briefly. Is, part of my life is based on my intuition and really feeling and learning how to trust myself on those deepest levels. And what I'm going to be talking about is how is our intuition different than our thoughts and different than our swirling mind and the ways that we can overthink. And also it's different than our emotional reactivity. What if there actually is a difference between our gut intelligence and our intuitive intelligence, and when we're emotionally reactive and we're making decisions out of stress, out of fear, out of anxiety, or even out of overexcitement and a sense of urgency. And when we do that, I know for me, when I make decisions out of emotional reactivity, it usually doesn't go very well. And not just in business, in personal relationships too. And so there's something about a deeper intelligence that we're going to get into today. And how do you actually access that as a leader? How do you get better at sensing what's happening in your team meetings right now, or the landscape around COVID and how to respond? How do you get out in front of that? And so that's what led me to write this book. Is I noticed this was a part of our conversation we're not talking about. There's a lot about emotional intelligence out there. There's not so much about intuitive intelligence. And so I was getting this sense that it's a whole blind spot and a whole area of opportunity that we really just haven't dove into. And with all of today's research and the science behind it. And so that's what inspired me to really put this together and make it as digestible as possible. So literally the book is about the 6 steps to connect with your intuitive intelligence. So how do you actually get better at your spidey sense to be able to anticipate what's happening around the corner? That's really what this is about. And just imagine what a skill that is right now when there's so much uncertainty in the space. How can you get a little more certainty and more confidence with your gut, with your clarity, with your purpose, with really seeing things accurately and sifting through all the data and knowing exactly what to pay attention to and what's actually not helpful? These are the kind of things we'll be getting into.
Excellent.
So let's just start with this. What is broken, right? And so we're living in a time right now where all of a sudden our whole reality has been shattered. And everything that we thought was solid and consistent, in all the ways that we're dealing with chaos, unpredictability, volatility, and just not knowing. We just don't know how this thing's going to go on for. When can I go back to my work? When is the government going to relax quarantine laws and restrictions? If that does happen, is there going to be another wave? Like, we just don't know how this world market is going to get back on track, or if it ever will in the same way. And of course, here's the key though. Every time we see, whenever our world shatters and everything we thought we knew shifts like that, there's also an opportunity. There's an opportunity to see things in a different way. Different parts of our life start to rise and get highlighted. New businesses right now are getting created because there's a new demand in the business space. And different ways of working together and helping each other are showing up that would never have happened 4 months ago. And different organizations and agencies are working together. Different countries are coming together in a way to unite against a common cause. So that's really what we're going to be looking at today, is our mindset on, do we just fixate on the problem and where we feel shattered, or where it seems like there's no hope? Or are we able to also look at the opportunities that are here that we see in a different way? And sometimes we need those reminders, or we need that help from each other, or our mates that can help us, or sometimes our spouse that can help us see things in a different way.
Interesting that you say that, Rick, because looking at just the thing that's blown me away, yes, there can be a lot of doom and gloom around this, but there can be also a lot of, there's businesses that are actually going gangbusters through this, and there's businesses that are suffering, and there's businesses that are going out of business.
Yes.
So in all types of things that happen, regardless of what they are, there's a positive and negative at all times. The thing that has blown me away is that the speed at which things can be developed nowadays and implemented.
Exactly.
The speed at which businesses have been able to retool themselves to go from manufacturing widgets to manufacturing medical equipment,
Yes.
etc. So they've gone, well, we're not going to sit back here. Let's get in and what's our contribution to this pandemic?
Yes. 100%. And that's really what this is about. And that's what I'm hoping that this webinar inspires for you, all of you listening, is what's a way that you can get into your leadership mindset? Because of course, there's a moment where we all get rocked. There's a moment where we all fall down and we're a bit disillusioned or confused, not knowing the next step. And that's part of the process when we get knocked off center. But what I love about having a leadership mindset is this idea of resilience. How quickly can we come back? How quickly can we recover? And so that's what this image is for me, is that, we're all looking at the world in a different way, and we're looking at problems in a different way because of our mindset. And our mindset is all of our beliefs, all of our preconceived notions, how we see the world, how we frame the world. And for example, do I have more of a negative mindset where all I see are the problems? Or do I have a more of an optimistic mindset, or even more of a realist mindset? There can be many different versions of this. And so what's the kind of mindset that my team needs from me right now? What's the kind of mindset that my customers need from me right now? This is an important question. What's the leader that's needing to be called forth inside of me that needs to be showing up right now for my team, my family, my community? Because if I'm here feeling sorry for myself and I'm more in a victim mindset, even if I've had a really rough go, and I know there's people out there that are in incredible amounts of pain, and I don't want to skip over that. That's very true, and that's real. But I like how Buddhism has this famous quote where they say, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. That really is powerful, in that we're all going to feel pain in our lives. We're all going to fall down and have to pick ourselves back up. That's part of being human, is we're going to have painful experiences, but suffering is optional. We don't have to make it worse on ourselves and keep dwelling on all the problems, the negativity, and the victim mentality. And that's really our responsibility as leaders. And if we see that on our team, or we see that in our company culture, how do we address that early on? How do we have those conversations if we notice that we're going into a negative mindset about where things are at? How do I need to course correct that? What's going to be a mindset that's actually honoring our strength and resilience, that we know how to do this and we know what we're capable of? So just something to think about right now is just getting a sense of, where are you located with your company culture right now? Whether you're doing, auto repairs, smash repairs, whatever your business might be right now, what is the mindset of your company? Something to think about for a second. And what would it look like to bounce back? What's being asked from you as a leader? For example, working with a lot of executives right now, a lot of what employees are wanting to hear is just more constant communication. Like just being in communication more often than normal, especially if you're remote. That's really a big thing we're seeing now, is a lot of staff are wanting just to be informed of what's really going on. Do I still have a job? What's the real situation on the ground? And what we're finding is more communication, but for shorter amounts of time. And how do you actually, and not holding back on checking in with your staff, like actually saying, hey, before we get into the tasks of the day, how are you doing? How are things at home right now? And spending a few minutes checking in as a person before you go to the tasks. And it's that kind of recognition of really connecting with your team that's going to really build even more connection and collaboration. So what if you had the mindset around, what if I could walk away from this experience feeling even closer to my team than before? What if I tried that on as a mindset? How would I even do that? What would be the steps I would take? But it has to start with that frame of mind. Gavin, anything you want to say about that in your experience with your clients?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that we're talking about the mindset and where are we coming from as a human being, and especially in this current situation, like I've seen so many things change over the last month, and so many new realities that are unfolding to actually shift this world into becoming a better place based on more humanitarianism. That it's really quite empowering, and I look at it from the point of you can be someone that is world famous, or you can be someone that's making a world famous difference, because there's a real distinction there. So, and I do some readings from a gentleman by the name of Eckhart Tolle, who quite a few of our listeners may know of, but he looks at the three modalities of being, and they are the first one, which is acceptance, enjoyment, and enthusiasm. So if I look at a modality of where am I right now, well, I'm in an acceptance mode. I'm in an acceptance mode of what is happening in the world, and not allowing myself to get too far ahead of that by going into fear or panic. And I didn't rush out and buy 150 rolls of toilet paper. I opted to stay at home and go, well, I know that this too shall pass, and let things settle down and they'll fall into place. So instead of overthinking it, I just said look, let's just be here and be right where we're at right now, and be present with what's going on, and take it minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, and moment by moment.
Yeah, and you remind me, Gavin, that there's really two different pandemics right now that kind of mirrors that Buddhist quote I just said around pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And the two pandemics are, there's a real virus, there's a real viral pandemic that's going around. And we have to be smart about that. We have to take precautions. We want to stay healthy, safe, protect our loved ones. All of that is true. There's a second pandemic, though, and that's the fear pandemic. And if you look at the incessant media cycles and all the sensationalism and the ways that, it's nonstop media attention around all the fear around coronavirus, what does that do? That actually hijacks our own cortisol levels, which creates more stress and actually hurts our immune system the more that we're taking in all of that information 24/7. And, of course, we can't ignore that the media has their own biases to have more clicks and to have more advertisement space, even if it's around coronavirus. So we have to be, I think, smart about that of what is the media diet I should put myself on? And how do I unplug for my own health and mindset, good part of the day? And then it's, when do I want to plug back in just to see what's going on in my area or what have you? And so what's the right balance for each of you to keep you sane around the two pandemics and not letting the fear pandemic get the best of you? Because that will hijack your mindset, and it makes it more difficult when the whole collective is feeling a lot of anxiety and fear. That makes it even harder to really be in your own self-sovereignty and your own grounded and clear mindset. It's even much more challenging.
Definitely.
So that's the challenge and the opportunity. Is the challenge, of course, is we've never had a more chaotic environment that's unknown since we've all been alive. We haven't experienced a Great Depression in our lifetime until what we're on the precipice of right now. And yet, this is also a golden opportunity to start thinking about how can I intuit the needs of my future customer and where things are moving? How can I anticipate the needs of my team before they even ask? How do I need to relook at my budget and resources? How do I need to move things around? How do I need to get smart about my liquidity and my cash and look at my assets and just, start to have those conversations with my advisors? What are the ways I can be agile and adaptable in this moment? And I really like this image of this young woman here where there's a flood of information coming toward her on the screen, but she's really connected to her heart and her core values, her purpose, what's important to her. So there's a way where she's not getting too distracted by all the noise around her, and she's tuning into that intuitive intelligence and that clarity. And so in a way, we're all being asked to do this in our own way. How can we learn how to trust ourselves and our strengths as well as our resilience and not get too overwhelmed by all the noise in the space?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of noise out there right now.
Incredibly. And so making decisions has always been hard, always, especially when there's a lot at stake and there's a lot of unknown variables. And so it gets even more hard in a moment like this where there's so much volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So what does that do? That brings up a lot of our own uncertainty and doubt. And this is where we often can doubt ourselves. And the tricky thing as a leader is when I'm really doubting myself and I'm not looking for ways of getting support or ways of getting clarity or ways of getting out of my own head sometimes, and I'm overthinking things and I'm making it worse for myself. My team is going to feel that. My family is going to feel that. My customers will feel that. If I'm coming from a place of panic and scarcity, maybe I'm demanding they pay me now 5 days before they're supposed to pay me because I'm freaked out. And so anytime I'm grabbing because of fear, or I'm trying to make a sale because of that from that place, it's going to backfire. People are not going to be attracted to that. And so it's not about fake it till you make it, but instead, how do I get myself centered and grounded? What are practices I can do to get a clear mindset so that I can make better decisions from a deeper intuitional place inside of me? Not from that emotional reactivity and not from overthinking things and only looking at the data on the spreadsheet, but not including my own inner experience and my inner wisdom from knowing my industry and knowing my customers so well. So we're going to do a poll here in a moment, but I first want to just share about this. So here's another way to look at this. If you think about your company culture and also about for yourself, we have 3 different zones here. And Gavin and I were actually talking about this before the call. Most businesses were just chugging along in the comfort zone. We're just basically on autopilot, sleepwalking through our lives, where it's Monday becomes Tuesday, becomes Wednesday, 9 to 5, go home, eat dinner with the family, watch Netflix, back doing the same thing. And there's ways where we really become unengaged and disengaged when we get into this comfort zone for too long, where we're too comfortable. Human beings, even though it's always great to feel comfortable, if we're too comfortable, we often get asleep at the wheel. And that's when we stop being innovative and continuing to be a disruptor in our market. Instead, we become the one that's disrupted. And so what happened with coronavirus is we went from comfort zone all the way to panic zone right away. Panic zone is when we are in that fight, flight, or freeze response. Our amygdala, our reptilian brain gets hijacked, and we're literally in survival panic. And the problem with that is we stop taking in new information. We literally get frozen in time. We don't make our best decisions from that place. We're only looking for survival. That's why people hoard toilet paper. That's why people hoard food or whatever it might be. They're coming from a survival mentality, and it's, I got to take care of me and my family and screw everybody else, right? It goes down to that level, that base level. And so if we're there for too long, it also really erodes our immune system, and it really creates a lot of wear and tear for our health and well-being. So the real key is, how do I stay in the learning zone as much as possible? And how do I get my team in this place? So if we're panicked, what do I need to do as a leader to talk them off the ledge? How do I bring them back to that sweet spot? And when we're in a learning zone, that's when we're engaged, we're alive, we're coming up with new ideas. We have our resources back. We're willing to experiment and innovate. We're willing to try new things. And we're no longer asleep at the wheel, but we're also not in a place of freeze and survival. This is where thrival happens. And that's, once again, the hidden benefit of this moment, is if we can really get ourselves into that mindset of, what are the opportunities that we're not seeing right now? What are the conversations that we're not having right now that we need to be having? And imagine having that conversation with your leadership team, and even posing that one question in your next meeting, saying, hey, what are the opportunities we're not seeing right now? given the new environment. Because what I want to offer is it's not that the rules of the game have changed, the game has changed. We're not going back to a new normal or an old normal of the comfort zone. We're not going back to business as usual. This is a global shift that's happening. Now, we don't know exactly what that will look like. No one does. But I can guarantee it's never going to go back exactly to what it was. There's going to be businesses that don't come back. There's going to be new businesses that emerge like a phoenix out of the ashes. It's going to be a new reality that we come back to, that we come forward to. So how can you start to think about that with your digital technology and your platform that you're using, with the tech of how to be even more in communication with your customer or your team, with how to be more engaged with your staff, whether it's maybe we don't need the office, maybe working remotely is actually working for most of our staff. Like, what are the innovations that we need to make that are going to keep us on the leading edge? So what I'd like to do right now is just take a pause and let's put up the poll. And I want you to rate, where do you feel like you are right now in these three zones? And this is going to be anonymous. And so please be as honest as you can. How would you rate where you're located right now? So take a moment to select your zone, and then we're going to share the results with you.
So we're just waiting for a couple more votes to come in. Well, that's really interesting, Rick.
Yeah. So if you press share your results, we'll all get to see it.
So we've got.
When you're ready.
Yep. Okay, that share's not working on that. So I'll just give you the numbers. We've got 100% of attendees, that's quite fascinating, that are in the learning zone.
Wow. Wow.
100%.
In some ways, 100%?
100%.
Okay. In some ways, I'm not surprised because you're on this call. And you're on this call because you're wanting to learn. And you're wanting to improve and really get the support you're needing, right? And the other thing, I think culturally, we were in panic a few weeks ago. And I think we've moved from that. And it feels like we're now a couple, we're a couple degrees down from that place of panic as a collective. And we're now kind of getting used to the quarantine and where we're at, whatever country we're in right now. So I think that makes sense. So how can you take advantage of being in this learning zone? So why don't we open it up to some Q&A? If anyone has any questions about whether it's about yourself as a leader or your team and your company culture and getting them in the sweet spot and how to take advantage of this moment, why don't we open up to any questions about that?
Yeah, that'd be great to get some questions coming through and just to ask Rick where we're at. But one of the things that I'd like to ask is, if I can see a raise of hands from anyone that believes that they were in that comfort zone before this and they were cruising along. Or I call it the complacency zone, where things were just ticking over and things were, we felt things were quite okay and no one could foresee that this was going to happen, but just interesting. Yeah, I got some hands being raised. That's really cool. And I thank you very much for your honesty on that, because that's a big one. Diane said, and welcome Diane. Diane's dialed in all the way from Syracuse in upstate New York. She's over on your side of town, Rick. And
hi, Diane.
Diane's one of our Planning Plus customers, and yeah, comfort for sure. And look, yeah, a couple more people there with comfort. So it's an interesting thing, isn't it, that we've gone from comfort to where we are now. Yep, another one, Vinny, comfort zone, plodding along nicely, he was. So now we've all moved from that comfort zone to the, learning zone. So interesting, what can change our thoughts, mindset, and beliefs, etc.
That's great. Any questions anyone has about that? Any
questions coming through? No questions at this stage, Rick, on that. Just some people just that are commenting on where they're at in relation to comfort and learning. So.
Okay, great. Great. Yeah, if you do,
He's saying need to adapt to new things to get through this tough time. And that's, Vinny, it's an adaptation, but it's an opportunity as well. It's an opportunity to be innovative. This is a most powerful time to be innovative in all types of things around us. So look for that. How can I look at myself as being an innovator and a leader of innovation? And just got a couple more comments coming in that I'd like to share there, Rick. Diane saying, not panic, just a new level of responsibility to staff and customers and info overload. Yeah, that's interesting too.
Yeah, that's a really good point. This came up in one of our previous webinars that we did around managing remote teams. And so here's another thing to think about is, yes, most staff want information on a consistent basis and know what's going on. That's going to give them some sense of comfort in a world that's very unpredictable right now. And yet, one of the things that we're finding good management is doing, good leaders are, they're actually asking their staff, how do you want to hear from me? How often? What's the best way to reach you? And if it's an emergency, what's the best way to reach you? Because some people respond better to text if it's an emergency, for example, and they don't really look at their email that much when they're at home. And you don't know their home situation. They might have a whole 3 kids in the background that they've never had to deal with before on the job. And so we don't know what they're going through at home. So the best thing to do is, how do we ask the question? How do we ask them, hey, what's the best way to communicate with you? How often? What's the cadence and the rhythm that we should establish? And so we're finding that when managers take the time to be curious and to ask those questions, it's preventing that information overload, and it's giving them the information they need at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we're going to dive a little bit into this skill set that we've been talking about around, well, how do I actually access that deeper wisdom, that intuition that I have? And once again, when it's so noisy outside, it's even more important to learn how to trust my gut instinct and that sound decision-making with confidence and that clarity. And so intuition, it's an embodied knowing that comes from sensing what wants to happen next. So I'm always listening for that. I'm sensing that question. What wants to happen next in this team meeting? What wants to happen next with this customer that's angry with me on the phone? And I need to sense, what's the solution that's going to help this situation? How do I listen to that? And sometimes a lot of this is actually nonverbal. It can often be how somebody says something, not only the words that they say, but how they say it. And this is where video is so helpful. If you're doing video conferencing with your customer or with your team, you're getting to read, a lot of their facial recognition and their micro expressions, how they say something. So it's so helpful. Even video can be more helpful in some of those ways. And so intuition, it's not just coming from my head. It's coming from actually my neck down as well, because we have neuroreceptors in our whole body. In almost every cell of our body, we have neurons. So we're going to get into the science of this, so it's going to make more sense. And so intuition, this is what the research shows also, is that it's within you. It's something that we all have access to. Now, we might not have grown up in an environment that encouraged our intuition. There are certain family systems or even religions or cultures that teach us to not trust what we feel or not trust what's on the inside and only pay attention to the outside. And so sometimes that can be very challenging, of course.
So that can come from conditioning as a younger child example.
Exactly. So if my father, for example, only valued logical thinking in mathematics, in science, and nothing else, then I'm going to be influenced by that. And there might be ways where I get shamed verbally or non-verbally for trusting my inner instincts about something because it's not based in fact or logic according to that mindset, as an example. And so intuition is also something you can teach, and it's learnable. Just like any skill, I can actually improve my intuitive senses and my capabilities by getting still, by getting quiet and listening, by learning my intuitive language. by learning, what happens when I do have that gut instinct about something? What happens when I listen to that or when I don't listen to that? And I start to build a relationship with myself over time. And it really is your invisible edge. We see a lot of research where as leaders get higher up the org chart, they actually give themselves more permission to trust their intuition more than middle management. Like so often middle management is just trying to follow the rules and appease their boss, and they don't give themselves enough permission to be more courageous in their decision making. So that's something that we've seen in the research around hierarchy in a company. So here's the quick science of this, is that part of the magic of intuition is when we get out of our head and our conscious thinking, we get into our subconscious. And that's when we're picking up senses and information and signals from our whole bodily experience around us. And it's like we're live antennas that are picking up on signals and broadcasting signals all the time. In fact, there's this great quote that says, "Who you are speaks so loudly, I can't hear a word you're saying." So who you are and your way of being and what you're broadcasting is so loud, what you're saying is actually secondary. And just think of most politicians we know, where what they're broadcasting something of who they are, and then whatever they're saying is just that thing on top. That's like, yeah, whatever, because we can feel what they're really communicating or what they're not communicating. Same as any business leader too. It's the same thing. And so the magic here is that our conscious mind can pick up on 24 bits of information per second, which is pretty good. The subconscious mind picks up on 20 million bits per second. That's a big difference. So the subconscious mind is basically 500,000 times faster. So when we can drop our thoughts for a moment and take a breath and get out of that reactive overthinking place, literally take a few breaths and come back into our body, and even ask a question like, okay, should I delay this project this quarter, or should we go forward? And what happens when I actually first settle down, get my breath going and relax, get out of my swirl in my head, get in more to my subconscious. And if I really imagine choice A, what happens? What is my body telling me? Do I feel open and excited? Do I get constricted? Do I feel, a painful feeling in my gut? Do I feel like an expansion in my heart? What do I notice? And then what happens when I run a simulation for option B? And I get back into that meditative state and I just imagine option B happening. And I almost do like a guided imagery where I can imagine, launching the product or holding back on it. What happens from that place? What do I notice? Do I feel more like I want to move toward that direction or further away? Or is it neutral and dead? Sometimes when I get an intuitive no about something, it's actually just like a dead, flat feeling. It's not a no, but it's just flat versus a yes where I want to move towards something. And so each of us are going to be a little bit different in our intuitive language, but we have to be willing to eliminate our distractions, turn off the media for a moment, and take a few breaths and get settled and just ask the question and check in. Okay, what needs to happen? Do I need to let go of 15% of my staff? I don't want to do it, but intuitively, is this the right move? And what happens when I really sit with that answer? And it's not about being comfortable and having my ego feeling comfortable. It's what actually feels right. And what I love is combining my intuition with data, with critical thinking. So I make some time to connect with my intuitive intelligence, but I also want to check in with my advisors and co-leaders. I also want to look at the data that we have around our finances. So it's important to do both. But the problem that I see is when most people panic, they don't make time to listen to themselves. They don't include that intuitive intelligence, and they just go with whatever data they were told, or they're operating from that emotional reactivity. And if you look at this diagram of the image here, the iceberg, this is very fitting to who we are. Most of our intelligence is below the water. the deeper wisdom that we have is not just our awareness and our logic and what we can track right now consciously. It's actually all the stuff below the surface that we're picking up on subconsciously. That's why it's also so important, what of the media and news cycles am I, hitting my subconscious programming with, and then where do I need to take a break and get outside and get some fresh air and get some sunshine and eat a healthy meal and exercise and make sure I'm taking care of myself. And lastly, what we've seen with the research, not just our research, but research that's out there objectively, that we actually make better decisions when we use our intuition when we're facing complexity and uncertainty. That's when intuition comes in the most helpful, because it's so complicated. And we need to be able to connect the dots fast. And we don't have time for 37 meetings over a certain decision we have to make. We don't have that luxury. We need to sometimes decide on the fly. And so how do we use our resource and learn how to trust that? And we have to test that over time. Gavin, anything you want to share from your own experience? I know you have been working with your intuitive intelligence for a while now and making decisions. Anything you want to share about any of this for yourself?
Interesting. I'd like to see a show of hands from anyone that has experienced this. When you go to bed of a night time, and as soon as you put your head on your pillow, you race off down the thinking road of 5 things, 10 things, 15 things, 20 things. Who does that happen to? As soon as you hit the pillow, you just, it's, here I go again. I'm off down that road. And it's really interesting that I'm seeing the hands are going up all over the place here. Most nights, hands up. It's what I've managed to do for myself is to stop that thinking. Mm-hmm. So when I go to bed of a night now, I lay down and I can consciously turn off. So the most powerful place for me to be is the space between the thinking, which brings you back to the present moment. And so the way that I get around that, when I actually, those thoughts do start to show up, I say, that's fascinating. I'll self-talk it out and go, that's fascinating. Thanks. Now it's time for me to rest. And I move it aside. And as I did that more and more and more, I just intuitively became better at it. And it gets to a point now where I can, there's lots of things that can go on in everyone's life each and every day, but you've got to be able to come, it's like you say, Rick, you've got to be able to come back to yourself and give yourself a clearing. I never used to meditate, but I love finding a space where I can just shut things down and have time to myself. And that can even be when I'm out on my bike. I post things when I'm out on my bike because I've just got into a place where it's just myself becoming more a part of me, not just the thinking brain, but my whole connection to mind and body, spirit and soul. So if that's a little tip for anyone, just acknowledge the thinking that's going on and then let it go. And you'd be quite surprised at what you can let go of, because the only thing that you can deal with at any one time is what's happening right now. Like, you can't be here on this webinar with us and be in 5 other places. So you have a choice to be totally present in this webinar, or to allow your thinking mind to take you to 4 or 5 other places. And when you do that, you could miss the whole opportunity of the learnings that can come from us within this webinar.
Exactly. And as Gavin's saying, letting those thoughts, and especially when you're ruminating on your thoughts and they're just cycling and cycling, that's not productive, but it doesn't mean it's easy to let that go, right? And so as Gavin's saying, and I think Ian said this on the question also, he shared, sometimes doing a physical activity gets that out of your mind. You get back in your body, literally, when you go for a run, when you do a martial art, when you are bicycling, swimming, walking outside. This is what Steve Jobs of Apple used to do. When he would get stuck on a problem, he'd get away from the computer, He'd walk outside the Apple complex in Cupertino, California, barefoot, partly because he's a hippie and partly because it would have him slow down, right? Because when you're barefoot, you have to go slower. And so he would get in a different kind of zone by getting out away from the screen time, being outside in that new inspiration, and going slow, almost like a walking meditation. And he would get these innovative ideas he never had before. That's intuition. And he knew how to access that place for himself. He knew how to let go of the normal thoughts. Because we've all had that time, that moment where we're staring at the screen and nothing's changing. We're just getting burned out. So that's really what this slide's about here, is we actually have three major brains. We have a whole network of neurons, not just in our head brain, but also in our gut brain and our heart brain. And there's a very well-known, the longest nerve in our whole body, called the vagus nerve, goes from our brain stem right here all the way to our gut. And it connects to every major organ in our body. And what they're finding is when we slow our breathing down and we do some conscious breaths, it actually activates the vagus nerve, which is the main nerve that communicates information from the body to the brain. So all the neurons in our whole neural network is communicating information in real time to the brain. And then also has the brain connect to the other organs. And so what does this do? This is what builds our immune system. It helps regulate our immune system when we start breathing in that slow, methodical way. And it also activates our intuition. And studies are showing this. How the vagus nerve works is we have 4 channels that go from the body to the brain, and 1 channel goes from the brain to the body. And so it's really about getting embodied, slowing down, taking those breaths, going for a walk, whatever it is that gets us in our body. And then that's when we're going to have more access to our whole neural network and be able to connect the dots faster. So even right now, I want you to try something that the Navy SEALs do when they go into a chaotic environment. They do something called box breathing. And this is very simple. I'm going to teach you this right now. And this is going to activate your vagus nerve. And I want you to notice what it does for you in your mindset. So right now, I want you to get into a comfortable posture in your chair. You could have your feet on the ground or however you're sitting, and your hands are just resting on your lap. And we're going to do what's called box breathing. So on the count of 3, we're going to begin with an inhale. So we're going to inhale for a count of 4, hold it for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 4, and hold it again for a count of 4. And that's the box. So it's a box of 4. So let's begin on the count of 3 here. We'll just do this for 2 cycles, and then let's check in about your experience. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. So begin inhaling for a count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now hold for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now exhale for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And hold again for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. One more time. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. And hold. And now return to your normal breathing. And you can open your eyes again. And just really quick, what are you noticing right now in your experience? So just if we can take a couple shares, what do you feel in this moment?
Yeah, just punch it into the Q&A if you wouldn't mind, people. Just what did you feel from that, and what are you feeling right now?
So Vinny says relaxed. That's great. Just, yeah, and no, it's not about any judgment or evaluation. Just notice, what is my experience after doing that? And do I feel any different than when I started the call?
Yeah, some great feedback coming in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've got Meredith says the mind quietens.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's exactly right. More energy. All I thought about was the 4 count. And that's a really powerful thing there, Diane, what you put up there, because you've got out of your mind, cleared the mind, clear head, relaxed. You know, Ian said that, you know, more when he goes out on a run at the end of the day. That's when things happen for him that take him head, heart, brain, gut, combination of those things. So it's really interesting that when you, like for me, when I go into that box breathing, that you can feel the nervous system responding, or I can anyway, because it just tends to go, and I can feel it through the cells of my body. So I have a lot deeper, it just resonates through me. But I just wanted to share with everyone, Rick, that I've recently been learning the Wim Hof method of breathing. Now that is just a really powerful thing, and just to share a little bit with you, it's of the way that it works for me is that I get into a shower of a morning, and the shower is a warm shower. It's not a hot shower. And then at the end of the shower goes to cold. I turn the shower to cold. And through the Wim Hof method of breathing, it's been conditioning and training me to regulate my breathing through all the phases of that temperature change. So that the goal is that by the end of, when I get better and better at this, that I'll step into a 2-minute cold shower first thing in the morning and have regulated breathing from the moment I enter the shower to when I come out of the shower. Now I'm at about 30 seconds now, but I'm finding that as that shower goes from warm to cold, my breathing is actually becoming more regulated. Whereas when I first started doing this, it was, and I didn't have that control of it. But now I'm getting much greater control, and the breathing is equally as deep. So it's similar to your box, but it's just another sort of method of breathing.
Exactly. In fact, I'm so glad you mentioned this. I've been doing that also around the cold shower at the end of the warm shower. And actually the science is showing this, that things that increase our vagal tone, which is what we're talking about, where we're activating that vagus nerve, which actually calms down our system, it regulates our emotions, and it also strengthens our immune system at the same time. So breathing and slowing down is one of the main ways to do that. And it's probably still the fastest way. But cold water also does that. It also strengthens our vagal tone. So does exercise. And also connecting with other people that we love, like having that human contact also does that same thing when our nervous system relaxes. You know, same with having pets. That's why a lot of people love pets, because it relaxes you. You know, when you have that dog or that cat, or even they've shown where when you look at fish in a fish bowl, it lowers your blood pressure because it's getting you to be present with a living creature. So all these kind of things relax and strengthen our vagal tone. And these are all real tools you can use. If you're really at night and your mind won't let go, try some of these methods to really help yourself get calm again. And that's how we can find that state of flow. This is that ultimate state of where our intuition literally has that outside the box thinking. We're literally in our ultimate creativity. Find that spot, especially when everything around us seems to be in a place of panic. We have to work extra hard to find our center, to find our ground. And breathing, I find, for me, is the fastest way. Sometimes exercise also. And so what's our discipline around that? You know, how can we set our day up where we are taking good care of ourselves? We're really having that work-life balance. Now that we're working from home for the most part, can we have more quality time with our family? Like, what's going to help us feel more connected? And then where can we surrender to the things we can't control? I'm going to stop worrying about some of the things that I have no control over. So how do I build discipline and systems and tasks around the things that I can control? And then how do I find that flow state for me and my team also?
And so yeah, the surrender is like that acceptance modality.
Yes, exactly. Instead of fighting reality, how can I accept it?
Yeah.
And then this is our last slide here, just around some tools. And we've already been talking about some of these. So how do you hack into your subconscious? How do you, if you're swirling in your conscious thinking and it's not helping, or you're emotionally reactive, how do you get into that deeper intuitive intelligence where you can access that innovation. So for some people, it's about relaxation. It's about meditation, mindfulness exercises, breathing techniques like we just did. I know for me, when I go into a steam room, there's just a way where my nervous system just relaxes and I get these new ideas for my business that I never had before. And there's a way I just can't help but relax because of the oppression of the heat. There's no choice but to surrender. And so you just have to find what works for you. For other people, like Ian said, going for a run. Gavin, I know for you, a bike ride. Like, what are those things that get you in movement, that get you on that autopilot, and then you can start thinking that creative thought and get out of that critical thinking in that moment. For some people, improvisation and play, and that's why we do offsites. When we're with the companies, there's a reason why we do field days where we're offsite, because we're in a new environment and we're able to access our creativity in a new way. For some people, doing art or music taps into those places. State changes. This is exactly like the cold baths with Wim Hof, or some kind of state change. Once again, a new environment, getting out in nature. For me, that's one of the biggest ones also. Getting away from screen time, especially these days where there's so much screen time. And then lastly, how do we disrupt our conscious mind? Some people do like mind puzzles. They'll even like when Diane said, thinking, I was just focusing on the numbers. That's actually disrupting my conscious mind, because all I'm doing is focusing on that. And then my subconscious can get to work and connect the dots in the background. And if you've ever heard the phrase from any of your relatives, if you ever have a difficult decision, sleep on it. There's a reason why that wisdom is true, because when we're sleeping, our subconscious is very active still, and that's when we're connecting all the dots from the day. And so our conscious mind is actually distracted, it's asleep, but our subconscious is very active still. And that's when we're putting together new thoughts and ideas. So I know some people, like one business leader I interviewed in my book here, he came up with new engineering tools for his chocolate factory that he never thought of before. But he'd wake up in the middle of the night and see these schematics of these chocolate pieces of equipment that didn't exist. And he would wake up at 2:30 in the morning and jot these schematics down, go back to sleep, and then he'd wake up later and then start building these machines. And then he eventually created them and brought them to market. And he has an engineer and chemistry background. He's a chocolatier, but he ended up creating a whole new business line of chocolate equipment to other chocolatiers based on these prophetic dreams he was getting from his intuition and his subconscious, because he made time to really honor that and to really write that down. So you never know when your intuition is going to speak to you. I always like to say, we don't find our intuition finds us. But we have to cultivate a space of open-mindedness, of receptivity, of slowing down, or it's not going to be able to find us because we're too busy and distracted. So how can you build more moments in your day when you're creating that open space, when you're going for that walk like Steve Jobs, a little bit slower than usual, when you're chewing on that problem that's bothering you and you're putting it to practice in these ways? Any final words, Gavin, before we wrap up on your side today?
I'd like to see just a show of hands from anyone that has gone against their gut feel on a decision before.
Does anyone
really
have
curious to know just how many people have had a gut feel and they've just gone, you know what, they've gone the opposite way. Mm-hmm. And how painful that was. And I'm seeing a good show of hands here.
Yeah.
Yes, we've got with great regret, a couple of comments are coming in as well. So it's really interesting that, what Rick is saying here, it's about going inside of ourselves at a deeper level as well, in mind, body, spirit, emotion, but not getting too caught up in the emotion, but coming back more to the feeling, to then use the intuition with the gut and then combine that with the data and maybe some of the other conversations you have to have with some of your team to get some more data coming back at you. to just solidify what your gut's telling you. And I know I've gone against it, and I've directly gone against it, going, no, I'm going to do this. And my gut was telling me all the way through, my whole body was telling me, don't go there, don't go there. And it became a really powerful learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we've got to be able to then let go of those things and not harbor them and move forward and learn from them and say, well, rightio, well, I've taken that lesson.
Yeah.
But from what you're saying there, Rick, and through your book, which explains it really succinctly, is just the combination of all of these things that combine with this, exactly what the title of the book is, Decisive Intuition. And
yeah,
I've just
exactly.
written down some notes here to say, well, you know, if we look at the positives on opportunities, contribution, leadership, where's our leadership right now at this point in time? Strength and resilience, constant communication. How often are we communicating with our people, our family, etc.? Who are we being as a human being? Are we being a human being, or are we being a human doing? Because the primary is being and the doing is secondary. And all too often we can get caught up in the secondary doing and lose focus on who we're being during that phase. And I've been guilty of that. So I always looked, and I'd say to myself, give yourself an uppercut. You've been a tosser. Come back to yourself, the real you. So I learned from that. How agile and adaptable are we being right now? How grounded are we? Are we in a thrival situation for ourselves in our business? And also what Rick said is, the old Buddhist there, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. So how often do we allow the suffering to overtake us? And then that just holds us back. But what it does, it ends up infecting everybody around us. So, you know, who's been in a situation where they've been there themselves, where their suffering has started to affect other people? And that's not a nice place to be. So we want to be aware of that and say, well, okay, let's get back to pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. I'll accept the pain, but I'm not going to allow myself or others to suffer from it. So
exactly.
lots of great feedback that's come out of that, Rick. And we can look at the two pandemics of virus and fear, and we've got, you know, the fear is panic, fear, victim, doubt, overwhelm, scarcity. So many things that come through fear. And get back to take time to listen to yourself. I think that's a real key thing, and try to take on some new skills that we've shared with you today that can help. And whatever those skills are, like just come back and listen to yourself. So exactly. That's from me. What I've taken from today and the learnings that you've been able to share with us today, Rick, which have been really invaluable. If anyone would just like to share back with us what you've taken out of today, that would be awesome as well. Just pop it into the Q&A. Vinny said hacking into our subconscious was great. Thank you, Vinny. We appreciate that. And we appreciate everyone coming on board today. And it was just if we go back to that poll where everyone was in the learning phase, which is really encouraging for us as presenters to get that 100% of people in a learning phase. So you're open to just saying, well, let's just be with this and see where it's going to take us, because the world's not going to be the same.
Yeah, and I just want to say once again, like, why I wrote this book is because I've betrayed my own intuition before, and I don't think I've ever known another more painful feeling than when I betray myself. And I don't listen to that deepest wisdom that I knew I should have listened to. And when you've had enough of those, you start to learn, oh, I want to listen to my intuition the first time, not the sixth time, because life is a little easier and more enjoyable when I do. So if anyone wants to take any of this deeper, you can get this book anywhere where they sell books near you on Amazon or anything like that. And it's going to guide you to the 6 steps to access your intuitive intelligence, or for your teams. And Gavin, I think you mentioned you might give a couple away.
Well, I've actually got 5 books here at home that I'm more than happy to give away. So what I'd like to do is if I can get 5 people that could just give us a little bit of feedback to Rick on what you've taken from today, shoot it to me in an email. Fantastic. We'll get you a copy of this book posted out.
So act now, so you get those books.
Act now, and that'll come to you coronavirus free, of course.
Well, you might want to wipe the cover just in case when you get it.
Yeah, we will.
Open it with a glove. Read it with a glove. And then secondly, we also have these online courses. If you want to take this deeper for you and your teams, we're offering a 50% discount on all of our courses. Go to intuition-university.com. That's the website. And then COVID50 is the discount code, and you'll get 50% off. So whether you're interested in sales right now, like intuitive sales, intuitive leadership, making better decisions, including your intuition, we have videos and online courses that are going to help build that for you. So that's another option if you want to continue to learn remotely, as well as if you are interested in coaching or training remotely, just contact us, get in touch with Gavin. We're happy to discuss any particular customization or needs. Thank you for today. It's lovely to be with you all. I appreciate it. I can feel your participation and engagement. That means a lot. And I hope you can really grab a couple key takeaways for yourself and for those that you're leading. Because right now is the time to build your legacy. Right now. When your back is against the wall is when you see your true character as a leader.
Yeah, step into it. Step into it. It's really trying times, but there's some great opportunity there to lead and to just learn so much more about ourselves. I think I know in this short period of time what I've learned about myself over the last month and stuff, and some deeper connections that I've had with myself and with people around me. So let's move on forward, and we'll wind it up now. We've been going for about 1:10, so it's been a great interactive. Thanks very much, everyone, for your contribution. Really appreciate it. And thanks for jumping on board and hanging in there with us as well. And I really hope that you got something out of it. And I sincerely want to thank Rick for giving up his time over there in California and joining us today as a special guest. And we'll wind it up now and close it off. And thanks for your attendance, everyone. And thank you personally from all of us, Rick.
Thank you all. Great to be with you.
Thank you. Bye
Blessings.
for now.